I think that people relate to a film like this, you know, with nice values. To some people, corny values, but basic values.
That sense of yearning and that quiet struggle. It's very much a film that you see into people's souls.
There are things in people's lives that you say, that identifies me, that created something in my personality that has shaped me and forged me ever since then, and that film did.
I still meet people 20 years later, I would say almost daily, who talk to me and say, oh, Tender Mercies, I love that film. But a huge commercial success it certainly wasn't, and I never thought it would be.
When you think of all the pressures that come into play to get something, and to have something arrive as with the dignity that I think essentially this film has, is to me a miracle.
I knew Horton at the Neighborhood Playhouse, and we did The Midnight Caller, the first play that I did of his as a theater piece, and then he recommended me to play this part in To Kill a Mockingbird. And so I've known him through the years.
I just think he's our #1 actor, and he has the same love for, I hate the word common people because I don't know what that means, but unexplored territory, or people that you would not think were complicated or interesting. His great gift and talent is that he's able to illuminate these people so that you just find them more than interesting. You find them fascinating, and almost his work is always full of revelations.
He always knew that I maybe wanted to play the part of a country western singer, and he came up with certain ideas, and maybe I helped give him certain ideas, but it was an original screenplay on his part. Whether he wrote it for me or not is debatable. I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't write for other actors. It would be constraining to me to do that. But deep into the work, I realized that this was something that I hoped he would like, you know. And fortunately, he did.
Everybody said it was George Jones said it was based on his life, which it wasn't. Willie Nelson said I ate Merle Haggard. Was it about Merle Haggard? I said, well, I love Merle Haggard, but I didn't try to make it him. It was nobody in particular.
And this film was turned down by every American director on the face of the globe, Earth. I can name you the roster of them. A number of them deny that they ever did turn it down, but they've just forgotten. We were rather, in that sense, rather desperate. So the name of Bruce Beresford was mentioned to me, and I thought, well, who is that? And they said, well, he's Australian. And I thought, oh my God.
The script was sent to me, that's all. After I'd done Breaker Morant in Australia, that film attracted some attention around the world, and these scripts started to come in from Los Angeles. And, piles of them. And this was the one that I really, really liked. That was all.
There's a certain parallel, I suppose, between Australia and the United States. Not as much as people might think, but I always said, better a talented guy from Sydney, Australia, or whatever, than an untalented guy from Dallas, Texas.
Well, I thought it was strange to ask an Australian to do it. But I didn't bother pointing this out to them because I was so desperately keen to do it. I thought, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I thought there were a number of American directors who could do it fabulously well, but I refrained from telling anyone this because I wanted to do it the minute I read it. Tess was an unknown actress. I think she was just doing little theatre in Texas. And I always knew it was going to be very hard to find that role, to cast that role, because I auditioned a lot of actresses in Hollywood who were mostly very, very good. But they brought to the role a sort of sophistication and a kind of worldliness that I thought wasn't going to help it, because it needed to have a sort of rural quality to it. It needed to be about someone who was definitely from part of the country that was cut off, but at the same time wasn't simple or foolish. And then when I went to Texas, Tess came to a casting for another role. And she walked into the room, and even before she spoke, I thought, that's the girl to play the lead.
I have teeth marks in my script where I bit it when it was given to me just to make sure it was real. It was a very surreal moment to do that first take. And I was so afraid until that first day that they were going to come to their senses and say, we're sorry, we made a terrible mistake. We're having so-and-so fly in from LA or New York, and thank you very much. Maybe you'd like to stay around and be the stand-in.
She's from, I think, southern Arkansas or western Arkansas, so it was, this kind of thing was not a big stretch for her, you know. And she fit the bill, you know, and I think she did a very good job. And the little boy we found right in the, he was from Paris, Texas.
We had a casting director who looked around the schools and came up with him. That was all. He auditioned lots of kids. He too had this sort of fairly straightforward quality that was very good. He wasn't affected.
He really liked me, and he showed me that. And little kids can tell. Little kids can tell. If it hadn't have been there, they wouldn't have gotten the reaction out of me that they did.
Bob got this boy to so trust himself and Bob and so able to communicate that when he got on the set, there was nothing artificial about him. I mean, he just was able really to live the part.
It didn't hurt that my own biological father died when I was young, which is kind of the character trait that Sonny has to bring into play with a lot of his reactions to people, because that probably helped. And in fact, one press article that came out said that my own dad had actually died in Vietnam, just like Sonny's, which, you know, wasn't true. But that, I'm sure that was a natural emotion that came out of me at the time.
Duvall was his sanctuary. Duvall, I'll go to Bobby's trailer and I won't have to do my homework. And Bob would take him in and they'd play guitar together. And my job became the mother role.
Just very motherly. It was a very natural thing. And from being around my own wife, I can tell how just women really have that intuition, whether they are mothers or not. And she was very loving.
Betty Buckley was very talented. She brought a real zing to that part, you know, and a real sense of whatever that was she had, that underneath, you know, frustration of a country singer.
I think she just came to a casting session in New York. And a key reason that she was suitable for it, of course, was that she sings. Because we had that big scene where she does that fabulous song, Over You. There weren't that many actresses who came along who could sing. Wilford was really cast by Bob. Wilford was a great friend of Bob's, and Bob wanted him in the role.
But I said, I want Wilford. I want somebody down here that's on my side, somebody that I can relate to. And Wilford's a wonderful actor. He's a very complex guy. Used to be a bodyguard for Howard Hughes. And he sings jazz in a club with a full orchestra, makes recording. Very interesting guy, and I've known Wilford a long time, and I wanted him in that part.
I thought Wilford was a bit too old for it, but he pulled it off okay, it was all right.
I can remember the director said, well, now Harry wouldn't do this, Harry wouldn't do that, and Wilford said, now look, let me tell you something. I'm Harry. Harry's not over here, Harry's not over here. Until you fire me or get another actor, I'm Harry, and whatever I do is fine, because I'm Harry. You know, he has a good point that way, you know, he's right in the moment. Yeah, Ellen, she's a character. You know, she's brought a sense of nice credibility to that part. Plus she was young and attractive and like had a certain sense of edge, a danger to her, which was good for that part.
Well, I have an idea it was Ellen's first feature film. I think she'd only ever done a television film before that. And she again came to an audition in New York. And that's where they all came from, the whole lot. Lenny Van Dolen and everybody. We cast the whole film out of New York except Tess, who I found in Texas.
Most of the film was shot outside of Dallas, near Waxahachie, Texas, in that area, and in the little towns around there. Palmer, Texas, little town, just wonderful, you know. It's that flat sense of things, you know. Well, you could put a marble, it's not going to roll very far.
Actually, the town of Waxahachie is very picturesque, with beautiful old sort of gingerbread houses. But we didn't film any of those. And I avoided them because they weren't really right for the part of Texas Horton was portraying. We never really said where it was, except that it was rather isolated and lonely.
He had a vision a little more barren than my original vision, because actually, when we got down there, it was cotton fields. It was quite lush looking. And he didn't want that look. He wanted to look more like West Texas. So he got rid of the cotton fields. and created this kind of lonely, barren atmosphere, you know, which I think served the film very well.
You see a little piece of life against this vast, open, almost nothingness. And you see the ground that's been plowed, but nothing's come up through it yet. You know, like something might grow there.
There was an old house sitting there on the highway that had been abandoned. And the production designer, Janine Opperwell, who's absolutely brilliant, I think she won the Academy Award for LA Confidential, she transformed it. Just the attention to detail in the room, the aging on the curtains, the colour of the quilts, the floors. I mean, it was fantastic to photograph it. You knew it was always going to look great.
Russell Boyd was the cinematographer. Wonderful Australian, quiet. He had mostly 3 words: yeah, right, and sure. And he lit with available lighting so that everything went very quickly, very smoothly. No bright lights glaring in your face.
You know, in so many Australian movies, the light looks so natural, the source is so natural. They never have any kind of artifice about them. And I thought for this film in particular, that completely natural look is going to be absolutely crucial.
Like people said, I didn't write the music at all. Really, I wrote just background, secondary songs. There were some nice songs in the movie, I thought, and whatever I can bring, I bring. You know, that was it. They tried to have it so it wasn't in a contract, but I had to make sure it was in a contract that I did my own singing. So, well, what's the point if you're not going to do your own? It's going to dub somebody else. I mean, there's no point to that.
We had a music score done for it originally, and I dropped it because I thought the score was too sweet. It was a very skillful score, but I thought somehow it sounded phony in the context of that film. It didn't ring true to me. So I said, I think I'll take it off and just use bits of guitar music and songs. More in tune with the sort of character Max Sledge was.
Like so many films do or plays, they tend to caricature people that exist between the 2 coasts. The flyover people, I think, as they call them in Hollywood. You know, like Horton once said, people don't know what really goes on beyond the South Jersey shore. So it's dealing with honoring those people without caricaturing them or patronizing them, which I think he knows how to do so well. It's very local, but yet it's universal as well.
Horton is America's Chekhov, you understand. If he didn't study the Russians, he's a reincarnation of the Russians. He is a quiet man who writes quiet people.
I think, like all really great writers, he has a vision of the world which is his own. You know, he actually sees people from an idiosyncratic point of view. He is a very keen observer of events, and he's his own man. He thinks for himself. He is Horton Foote. It's his world.
I know that people think I have a certain style, but I think style is like the color of your eyes. I don't know that you choose that. And I don't know that I consciously write reactive characters. To me, my characters aren't passive at all. But I just felt the world of Max Sledge, who was a very hurt, damaged man, that silence was his weapon.
Duvall has the ability to completely inhabit the person that he's acting. He totally and utterly becomes that person, to a degree which is uncanny.
Someone once said to me, well, how's Robert Duvall? And I said, I don't know Robert Duvall. I know Max Sledge very well.
I never forget the shock I got the very first day on the set when I called action. He went into some Max Sledge speech. I remember we were filming in the little motel, and I could feel the skin crawling up the back of my neck because it was so extraordinary the way he played it. I mean, it was actually something quite simple, but it was so utterly and completely believable.
You can't concoct or push ahead something other than what you have at that moment as yourself, as that character. It's you at that moment in time within a fictional set of circumstances. But, you know, between action and cut, it's a nice world, but you can't force that any more than you can force it in life.
There's a scene in the film where he comes back after going to see his ex-wife sing. Well, when we got ready to do my close-ups, he yells at a hair person. something I never saw him do. He just went off on this person. Now I'm really angry at him. We do the scene. On the way out of the set, I see him apologizing to the hair person. He's done it to get at me.
I mean, Duvall is a interesting, rather complex sort of guy, and he's a brilliant actor. I think he felt somewhat apprehensive about an unknown Australian director coming in and doing the film and being perhaps not familiar with the American way of life. And he was rather anxious, I think, and a little apprehensive.
We didn't get along 100%, but that doesn't mean to say, I was going through things in my life, maybe he was, and two different cultures. And, but it worked. I mean, we found a meeting of the ways. He gave me my room and I gave him his room,
He used to get irritated by the way I work, which is that I storyboard all the scenes beforehand and work out the shots. And I'd say, well, we do it like this, we move here, move there. And I think he felt that this in some way restricted him. But of course, I always say to the actors, well, if we don't do this, what do you suggest? And usually the thing they suggested was not as good as what I'd thought of, because I'd been thinking about it for a long time.
But probably something I never took into account before was the studio concept of saying, no, it has to be this way. I have final cut, ba, 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 ba. So maybe these guys that come in that don't have final cut like they did in their own country, plus they're on unsure ground over here anyway. Everything becomes very tentative, and the final result isn't as good as what they did before from whence they came.
And of course, he was also a producer on the film. And he also had aspirations to direct. He has directed a bit. So he would frequently, he'd come up to me. Sometimes he'd come up to me with rather funny directives. Like just before we started, he said to me, oh, we don't like close-ups. He said, don't want any close-ups. He said, I always like films to be shot with the character seen full length and standing still facing the camera. Well, I'm not sure to this day if he was really serious. But, I never took that much notice of it.
There was a day that Beresford walked off the set. It was the day that Ellen Barkin and I were shooting our scene together, and a phone call came for Beresford from Mr. Duvall, who was not happy about something. And words were said, and Beresford pretty much said, well, if you want to direct the film, go right ahead. And he left.
I mean, I've seen happy, totally harmonious sets where everything goes perfect, and what's the movie about?
I mean, we never argued over the interpretation of the character. We were always in agreement on that. And that was the key thing.
It was a happy combination, I think, of certain kind of temperaments that gave it a certain kind of quality. I think probably the most, and to me the most daring scene, is the scene between Bob and his daughter. The scene itself, the whole scene is moving to me, but the most daring thing in the scene is when Bob sings the song with his back to the camera. Now, that's not what you call conventional filmmaking, but I think it's an extraordinary moment.
Well, I think it worked nice. Everybody said, oh, why did you turn your back and sing? I said, well, just the way it happened. It's just, it's just a nice connection. After all those years, you connect and you don't connect. You don't try to do it an obvious way. You just kind of do it, I think the scene in the garden where I said I don't trust happiness and I never will, I think that was a defining part of his character. Because, if you just lost a daughter, there's got to be something beneath the stoicism that you see.
We had a few previews of the film, which were the most curious previews I've ever been to, because I've been to lots of these. These ones were very strange because they were all the same. The audience were enormously attentive and nobody walked out. And you could literally hear, if you flicked a bit of paper on the floor, you'd hear it fall. They were so watching with so fixedly. And yet the ratings, when we got the cards back, they were absolutely disastrous.
It was Universal who were not happy with the film and decided to abandon it, really, essentially.
It was released in 3 theaters. It was released in one New York theater, one LA theater, one theater in Chicago for the first 6 months of its life. Then they didn't know what to do with it. Universal had made a film called Scarface, which had cost them so much money that their whole advertising budget was in Scarface.
I had Willie Nelson in New York, and he was willing to do some publicity for the movie. And the woman, whoever it is, was the head of publicity for Universal, said, how could Willie Nelson help with this kind of movie publicity-wise? And I thought to myself, if you're dealing with this kind of mentality, how could Willie Nelson help a film like this? Then, please, wow. I mean,
I don't know that they disliked the film. I just think they thought it was inconsequential. Had no consequence at all. And I guess they thought it would just get lost in the shuffle.
So when the Academy Awards came up, it was almost a year later. So we were very amazed that it got all these nominations, because mostly films that get nominated, they're released very near the awards, so everybody remembers them. And this had come and gone like 10 months previously. So the award nominations were startling to all of us.
When I won the Oscar for To Kill a Mockingbird, I hadn't gone because I didn't think I was going to win it. And so I thought, well, I better get there this time because it's just... And I heard that, you know, there were all kinds of odds and that we were in the running. And it was a total surprise.
it was nice because I was the only American up for an Oscar. It was all 4 British guys and me. And I think I remember when Dolly Parton said, and the winner was, I knew I'd won it because I can't think she was kind of on my side because, you know, being a country singer. So, you know, it was a nice evening. You know, you worry about more what you're going to say when you get up there. It's like nervous, well, you know. But it was a nice evening.
They had already sold off the video rights, the cable rights. So the cable company had a perfect right to do it. I broke my heart. They released it on cable a week before. So that it just killed any distribution after that.
This was my first job in motion pictures, and I go to work on a film that's so exquisite. I've never, ever done anything of that caliber. It was great fun. I loved the character. But if something that you want to just pick up and hold as a little, like one of those little snowballs that you keep forever, that's what that film is to me.